Hey everyone, it is good to see you this weekend and hope that you all had a fun and safe Halloween. Now, over the last several weeks, we've been looking at fear and how it impacts and drives the way we interact with our world. And one of the elements that we talked about in the first week is that fear is this belief that something that has not happened will happen. It's a required full belief, no getting around it, and at times it can even really be consuming for us. And we've spent the last several weeks even looking at some of the couple different types of the fears that impact us. So failure, the fear of others, and the fear of missing out. And through these conversations, I hope you've been able to see a little bit more about how fear impacts our lives, maybe a little more than what we realize. One of the things about church is I think the fact that we have this tendency to throw around these phrases and these terms and expect that there's kind of this common understanding. And however, I think that if we're really honest, we'd find that maybe we're not all on the same page as much as we like to think that we are. And one of those words, I think, is faith. And in fact, it's one of the foundational words that we use, but I would venture to guess that we all have different understandings and meanings for this word. And the truth is, there's part of that is the fact there are different types of faith and different meanings of the word, and different uses of the words, and different applications. But as we talk about faith, I want to put it into context of what we've been talking about with fear, because just as fear is a committed belief about something that may or may not happen, faith could actually use that same definition. Faith could be a committed belief about something that may or may not happen in our lives. In many ways, as we look at faith, I think that we'll see that faith and fear are actually kind of polar opposites of each other. Faith is actually the opposite of the fear that we've been talking about. And as we've looked at several different types of fears, sometimes there's a foundation or a reason for us to fear something. Maybe it's based on our experiences or just the nature of what we fear. So, for example, maybe you have a fear of dogs because when you were younger, you were bit by one. Or you have a fear of lions because you have enough knowledge to know that in nature they're very, very dangerous. So our experiences can actually have a huge impact on our view of the world, but also our view of God. And the reality is that at some point in your life, you're probably going to experience suffering and trials at some levels. And some of you may have already experienced this. In fact, in the Bible, there's a guy by the name of Job, and the guy literally lost everything that he had, and all of his friends were giving him all sorts of advice and all the reasons the bad stuff had happened to him, even to the point of telling him that he just needs to reject God and turn his back on God. And in the midst of this, Job says something very interesting. He states, "What I have always feared the most has happened to me. What I had dreaded has come true." And so, like many of us, Job experienced hardships, and some of us have done that. But even though his greatest fears and the power of his fears impacted his life, he refused to reject God. And this is significant because in the midst of trials, and the realization of our fears, there are moments that can be really easy to blame God or harden our hearts toward God. They can even sway us from living in a place of faith. So then that goes back to our original question: what is this faith, and what does it really look like? Now, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, we have this great long passage that is centered on the very idea of faith. In fact, it's actually even called the faith chapter or the hall of faith. And through this chapter, the author of Hebrews takes the time to look at several of our heroes of our faith in the Christian and Jewish faith and talk about their experiences. The writer actually starts the passage with giving a definition of faith, and he says that faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things that we can't see. Now, that solves it all right there, right? There's our definition. But I don't know about you, but I can kind of get a general idea of what the writer's talking about, but it doesn't really help me apply faith and know what faith really looks like at the root level. Because if we aren't careful, what we can see here is that if we hope for it, then it'll happen. And some people do define faith that way. So I remember even being in high school, my family and I had just moved to a new city right before my junior year, and it was actually the first time in my high school life that I didn't have a job. And so that summer, I took advantage of my parents not making me have a job, and I spent a lot of time cooped up at home with absolutely nothing to do. New town, new house, nothing to do, right? And so, unfortunately, at that time, like the only thing that we got on TV was TBN. You know what I'm talking about? Like the channel with the really loud preachers that yell and sweat and ask for a lot of money. Like that's what I spent my summer watching. And like any 16-year-old kid, I really wanted my own car. And listening to this channel one day, the speaker, I won't even mention his name, told me that if I just believed hard enough, had enough faith, then God would give me whatever I would ask for. He even actually spent time laying out an entire theology, a horrible theology, of why we should all drive brand new cars as Christian. And I was sold, sign me up, new car that I don't even have to pay for. Who else is in with me on this, right? This was the ideal for every 16-year-old out there. So every day I would come home and I would check the mailbox and waiting for the check and my keys to my new car because I believed it. I knew it was going to happen. But the thing is, it never came and it never happened to go that way. And I don't think it was God's intention for it to ever happen that way. And for some of us, this might be our definition of faith, believing something that should happen that just hasn't happened yet, and if we just believe hard enough, it'll happen. But today I want to look at kind of a different view of faith than that. And I want to look at 3 of my friends in the Bible that really actually helped me understand what true faith is. And more than just hoping for something and thinking that if you try really hard, you can hope it into existence, because like Job and like us, sometimes things don't work out that way. So in Daniel 3, we're introduced to a group of friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Props to the parents for really awesome names, first of all. And if you don't know the story, these 3 friends were kicked out of their hometowns and living in a different, strange land far away. And in this new land, they were actually trusted advisors of the ruler of the land, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, and also another great name. And one day, this king Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebi for short, as I like to call him, decides to build a statue of himself and force everyone around to bow down and worship it. And these 3 guys, they just refused. They wouldn't do it. So fast forward, after the back and forth, do it, no, etc., Nebi decides that he's going to throw them into the furnace. And right before this happens, they make a statement that unlock what faith really looks like, in my opinion. And here's what they say. They say, "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image that you have set up." Now, just by itself, that probably doesn't help much. That probably doesn't help you define faith anymore. But let me break it down for you, because there's 3 distinct statements that they make that really are progressive steps of faith. And they start off with, our God is able to deliver us. And this is really the starting place faith. This is the place that is a trust in the ability of God. The starting place is knowing that there is a God who is powerful, all-knowing, and whose ways are higher than our ways. Think about it this way. If you've ever been skydiving, the starting place of skydiving is trusting that the equipment won't fail you. It won't let you down. And the faith that your equipment can keep you safe. This is the same manner that we start with God, the ability that God can do these things. And sometimes this can be a really hard place to encounter faith, because our fears impact our ability to walk in this trust and this faith. Our experiences might not line up with the trust in God, and it may cause us to doubt, but the truth is that trust in the ability of God really is the starting place of this journey. Simply saying that God is able doesn't go all the way, though, right? And throughout the New Testament, what we see is there's a shift that happens in people, that they would come to Jesus and they would ask for something and say, can you do this? Or if it's your will you do this? And it's this shift from just simply the ability to asking, like, do you really want to do that on our behalf? And the second step of faith that these 3 guys embarked on was the will of faith, that God will deliver us out of your hand. One of the hardest places of faith is believing that what God promises he will do, but not just that he will do it, that he'll do it for us, for me personally, and making faith a personal action of God on our behalf. Oftentimes, as followers of Jesus, we don't doubt that God is able to do something. I mean, he's God, right? And he can do anything he wants. The trouble comes that it's for us, right? That maybe you can picture it happening for a friend, or maybe they have a friend that everything goes right for them. You're saying, oh, well, God might do it for that person, but I don't know if he'll do it for me. And in Matthew chapter 8, 5 through 13, we actually find this Roman soldier that comes to Jesus, and he asks him, hey, will you heal my servant? And Jesus asks the soldier, he's like, hey, should I travel back with you and heal the servant? The soldier says, no, there's no need. If you just say the word, she'll be healed. In other words, I know that you can, and I know that you will on my behalf. And then Jesus applauds this man's faith, saying, I haven't seen faith like this very often. And the truth is that there are places that God hasn't answered my requests, though, right? He hasn't given me what I wanted. And this can really impact my ability to know that God can and know that God will, right? All we have to go on is track record. And the trust and the willingness of God, it can lead me to this last place of faith. And this final passage, the thing that they say is that even if he does it, let it be known we're still not going to bow. The place of full, completed faith is a trust that the ways of God are in fact higher than our own, and the faith and the trust in God's ability and his doing it on our behalf isn't contingent on seeing the fullness of it in our lifetime. Or it isn't built on even the history of God doing it on our behalf in the past. A full faith is a place that says that even when, like Job, the places of fear impact us, we're still able to stand and trust that God is still God. To be able to say that we're not going to bow, we're not going to break, God is still in control, and we still have full trust and faith in him. Throughout the book of Hebrews 11 that we talked about earlier, this list of these guys and these people and these guys and women that the writer's talking about that impacted the world with their faith. And in fact, it says that many of them did not see the fulfillment of the promise. But because of their faith, it happened after their time. So they might not have seen it, but after them, it came to pass because they trusted God and said that even if we don't see it in our life, we're still going to walk in a place of trust. Their faith was not connected to the outcomes. It was connected to the nature of who God is. True faith is always connected to promise, whether it be the promises in the Bible for all the followers of God, or if it's a personal promise from God to you, believing that God is able to accomplish these promises in the midst of our fears, that he is willing to do it on our behalf, and ultimately that our belief is not contingent upon seeing it happen. It's contingent on the truth and the promise of God. The reality is that oftentimes our faith has to be bigger than our fears. Fear can keep us from walking in this belief, but faith has to move us to belief and trust in the face of fear. It really is that evidence, that viewing of things that we hope for in this promise, like Hebrews talks about. In our lives, there's tons of places that fear can speak louder than faith. And in those places, it's important to know that God is able, that he's willing, and that even if he doesn't, even if things are hard, God is still going to be God. So to just think through your life, what are some places that you need to let the cans and the wills and the even if nots of your faith to be bigger than your history and your fears? Maybe there's a place in your life that fear is screaming louder than the trust of who God is. Today, can we just ask that you would have a leader pray for you to take the next right step towards Jesus? Maybe it's a simple acknowledgement of God's ability to impact your situation, or maybe it's just a step of walking in the even if moments, or the even if not moments. Whatever it is, I pray that God would help you to know that his love does drive out all fear, and that can allow you to walk in a place of faith. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.